Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the weekly show. I'm starting because he's just sitting there, so I don't even know if he was ready to roll or not. We are really excited to be with you today because talking about leadership, because leadership always, because we know it's always about leadership. I am here with my man Jimmy Casas, who is on the West Coast today, so it is early morning for him. He's got the Fall Creek stuff on. I got the Go Cricket stuff in the back. We are all Fall Creek all the time this week. I got to move this over a little bit. I got a mess in my office. My desk is a mess. I don't really like it, so we're going to try to move it over a little bit, see if we can do some other stuff. But thank you so much for being with us today. We are humbled by the support in terms of people jumping on and hopefully helping leaders that are listening with anything that they need. And Jimmy and I kind of talk about, we literally jump on before the show and say, what do we want to make sure that we get into today? And there are times that we think, have we talked about that? Are we really, thinking about anything different? And it's kind of like, we think about it just from a leadership lens, like it's easy to know what to do when you know the answer. It's really hard to lead when you don't. Welcome to the show, right? We don't know what we're going to talk about. So here we go. We're just modeling leadership right here. We have no idea what we're going to talk about. Sometimes if you don't know the answer, it's harder to lead when you don't know the answer. And this happens to us a lot as leaders, is we don't know all the answers, but at the same time, if we can create a process by which we can see great things, we can help people move forward, and we can find joy in the job, I think we're going to be in a much better situation. So I am in Wisconsin today. It's not that cold today. It's like 30 degrees. What is it? It's like, 32, 30, what is it? 30, 31. It's 31 degrees out. It's balmy, Jimmy Casas. It's balmy out here. Where are you and what's going on?
Joe, don't be too upset. It is 38 where I'm at, and it should be about 68 because I am in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. So, but you know what? You get here and you can just stay indoors and never have to experience that cold weather. So no big deal. So we'll get through it. Yeah. But Joe, this morning I woke up and I'm like, which hat am I going to wear? The Iowa Hawkeye hat? Am I going to wear the Go Crickets hat? Or am I going to wear Argentina? Go Argentina!
Oh, yeah. Go Argentina. Yeah.
Go Argentina. That's right. No, it's good stuff. I was watching the game last night. Pretty exciting. So love good soccer. Love good soccer. Because I watch it all the time, Joe. I watch it all the time. I love good soccer every 4 years.
That's right. You can end the game in a tie, Jimmy. Like, why? What are we like? No,
not anymore. You can't, Joe. Not anymore.
I'm gonna tell you, when people tell me, well, it was a super exciting game, and I'm like, yeah. So what's the score? Well, it was 1-0. But you said it was exciting. You said it was exciting. Yeah, in the 75th minute they scored. Tell me about that again. It was exciting. Well, they kicked. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. But I will say this. I'll watch when the Americans are playing. I'm going to watch it. I'll watch it in the Olympics just because it's just like, and I'm sitting there cheering like I know what's going on. That's not offsides. How's that offsides? That's not offsides. If somebody was to ask me what's offsides, I don't know, but that's not it. Whatever. I know that's not offsides because that's a goal for us for sure. I'll play that game all day. So, but yeah, that's what it is for soccer for me. But anyway, that's kind of where we're at.
Has joined us, Joe. Maybe Frank will help us out because Frank says I'm looking forward to a great conversation. I say, Frank, then jump into the studio and start talking. I want to hear your conversation.
Give me a question,
Frank.
We want some.
You're on here
throw
every
some
week.
Questions.
Frank is here every week, right? We'll throw the link to the thread in here just in case we can entice Frank to jump in here. Yeah. So we'll throw that in there. So
absolutely.
Anyway, so here's one thing I have for us, Joe. I was looking at some stuff here this week about personalities and leadership. Do they go hand in hand? Can you be an effective leader if you have a dry personality? Do you have to have a personality that's kind of go all the time? And what if you're not that type of leader? What if you're more introverted? What's the role that plays in terms of leadership, and how important is personality and leadership? So thoughts on that, Joe Sanfilippo?
Yeah. I love it.
No, because you have no personality.
Well, Here's the thing. Yeah, I think it goes on either side. I honestly do. I don't think you have to be like a dynamic, like you rah rah guy to be a great leader. But I also think the other side is true. If you're too much of a you rah rah, here we go, leader, it can be not as effective as well. So I think what I try to tell people when they start talking about like I want to be this kind of leader or this kind of leader, I kind of like ask them, hey, do you want to be or are you? Like, are you going out of your own comfort zone? Are you going out of your own personality to be somebody that you're not? Because the farther that you get away from not being authentic about who you are, the easier it is for people to tear you down and tell you that you're being fake, right? And that really impacts your leadership. I don't know if there's one way. I really don't. I don't know if it's like the best leaders have the most charisma or the best leaders have the best process or the best leaders are quiet leaders that lead from the middle and let people kind of, celebrate the work that they do. Or the best leaders are out in front celebrating the great work to make sure that everybody gets a chance to see what's going on in that space. I don't know, whatever it is, I think what it comes down to is you just have to be authentic in the space. And if you're authentic in the space, it changes it definitely doesn't change the conversation. If you're authentic in the space, it gives the people that you serve the understanding that you're going to be real with them, right? And that ends up being the biggest thing for me. I don't know if there's one way to do it. In fact, I'm just going to say, I don't think there's one way to do it. I don't think one way is better than the other. I really don't. And if we try to create something that we're not, it's actually going to come back and kind of get us on the backside if we do it that way. So I think we got to be real clear and careful about that when it comes down to personality. What about you, Jimmy?
Well, first of all, we got Frank in the studio. I'm so excited, Frank. It's good to see you. Thank you so much,
fellas.
For good to see you, Frank.
Frank. Saving
the show. Saving the show. I just did like 3 minutes of great content, Jimmy.
That's great stuff. You're exactly right, though. You have to be yourself.
Yeah.
And not every leadership style is the same. And you guys, better than that. I know we talk a lot of sports analogies, Joe. You and I both had basketball backgrounds. If you try to be somebody else in your coaching philosophy, you're going to get in trouble real fast.
I agree.
And people seeing you for who you are, I think, is one of the most important. That honest intent. That whether you're a guy like me, and I'm a little bit more like Joe, I'm a little bit more outgoing, I'm a little bit more talkative, a little bit engaging with people. I'm always a people before paper person. That's why we'll come in here on Saturday mornings and do all the paperwork. But real authentic leadership, I always said this: relationships determine results. And that's just been the motto I live by.
I love that.
I couldn't agree more.
I love that. Relationships determine results. Well said, my friend. Well said. So just so Joe doesn't think I'm kind of just like copping out on this question, Frank, I will give it my best shot. But then we're going to come back to you, and you can talk about anything you want to talk about this morning, or ask a question, or share a reflection, or whatever. And I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of think through that while I'm answering this question that Joe just shared. So, but I love that comment, Joe. So, thank you for sharing that. Joe Sanfilippo, I'm sorry, Frank. Joe Sanfilippo, well said, my friend. And I do believe in the authentic space. But I do think, I think about this as I kind of think sometimes think about it a couple of ways. Number one, that I do think that some people just have a natural presence about them, right? There's a certain aura about them that you meet these people, and for some reason, you connect with them because they just have this presence. And I don't know if it's demanding or a commanding presence, or it just sucks you into their presence, right? And I think part of that is because I believe that most people want to be led. I really do. I know I want to be led. I can't speak for other people, but my experience is most people want to be led, but they want to be led by individuals who exude something that, in my belief, kind of connects with them. It aligns with them. And so I think there are people who want to be inspired, right? I think there are people who want to be motivated, people that want to believe, people that want to partner with other people and accomplish something. There's all these different things. And then when we hear all these things about the different attributes of effective leaders, and you kind of started sharing those, Joe, What about the quiet leader, the one with charisma, the passionate leader, the empathetic leader, the connector? I mean, there's all these different types of leaders, right? But I also see them as more as the attributes of those individuals. So they have these different attributes about them, these characteristics. And I think there are two things that are important. One is, how intentional are we with the people that we lead to share with them the type of leader that we are? In other words, like you said earlier, are you trying to be that, or is that just who you are? And I do think it's important that we communicate that to people, so people don't try to figure out, well, what kind of leader are they, right? And so sometimes there's that clarity of being very intentional about that. But we also know sometimes we don't get to define that. People will define that for us based on our behavior, based on our actions, based on the way the way we interact with other people. But I also think that no matter how many attributes, because I think all of us have many attributes, but I think one skill is how to draw the right attribute in the moment that you need it. In other words, there is an individual that's going through something and you draw your empathy from that. Or there is a moment when people need to see you excited about something and you draw that out. I think there are times when people need to feel connected, and even a smile, right, can help that. So there's these different attributes, and I think it's the ability to draw the attribute that you need in the moment that you need it to help lead your people. And so that's kind of how I see it. But I know it's a very complex, but I'm like you, Joe, I don't think it's an either or, definitely not. But I do think we all have different characteristics in terms of leadership. But I also know this, that I think we shouldn't be saying things like, well, that's not who I am, and that's not like that, right? Well, it's kind of like learning thing. I think there are times when you need to be that leader because your people will need to see that. Doesn't mean you need to be that all the time. It doesn't mean you're faking it. What I'm saying is, can you develop some of these attributes, right? Can you develop over time some of these characteristics and do change a little bit? Again, you're not going to be that person all the time, but there are moments, right? Like, people need to see moments when you just have fun. Some people, you see some leaders that are, oh, I'm not that, I lose respect if the kids think I'm having too much fun with them. But I do think there are moments you have to have some fun with them. So anyway, those are just my thoughts and some opinions on that. Frank, I'll let you kind of share some thoughts back on that if you want, or you can talk about whatever you want, my friend.
Well, Guy, I think that was great, Jimmy. And I was taking some notes down here, and I get to thinking, that engaging spirit. That can be that you're someone that's come in and you're the Jim Valvano of the world and everything's great, on fire, or you're the Tony Bennett of the world and you're just calm, cool. The both fabulous leaders in that regard. When I heard that one point you just made, and I wrote this down, as a leader, we must be flexible to lead as those that need led. So I've got to adapt. If I've got a person that's maybe a little bit more reserved, I got to be able to not come in, going 100 miles an hour or trying to, hey, you got to do this, and give them these great rah-rah speeches, as you were saying, because they tune that out. That's not that's not how they want to be led. So as leaders, we have to be flexible. We have to be adaptable to lead the masses how they need to be led. The days of the drill sergeant, and this is the only way it's going to be done, that's not the real positive way to build teams nowadays. So we have to be really adaptable and flexible, I believe. Two things I come up with all the time that we talk about is we have to be very measured, and you got to listen to lead. And that may be the most important attribute. And then we always say API and AHI. When we're having conversation, whether it's difficult or if we don't agree with whatever it may be, API, assume positive intent.
Yeah.
Assume positive intent. When they're complaining about something, maybe assume the positive, or AHI, assumed honest intent.
Yeah.
So we'll use that a lot. And I use that a lot myself. When someone comes to maybe has an issue, a complaint, a difference, I got to assume positive intent. And that makes me turn my listening ears on a little better.
I'm laughing, Frank, because I was talking to Jimmy about it this morning, and the walk that I did to work this morning, and I'll get that out hopefully this afternoon, was that exactly that scenario with a little kid who's 6 years old messing around in a hallway. And I didn't assume positive intent at first. And when I realized what was going on, I had one of the best conversations that I've had with a kid since I can remember. He was so excited. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I assumed he knew what he was doing. He was making a mess. And I'm like, come on. I mean, and that's with a kid, right? So that's why I was laughing, because that's exactly what I talked about this morning in terms of trying to get people in the right side. We're always assuming the positive in terms of what goes on. And honest intent, that's fantastic too. I really appreciate that too, because if we don't, we start to make assumptions. And what I talked about was, if you're going to make an assumption about people, right, make sure you assume on the right side of the line, right? Make sure you assume that they're doing good stuff, as opposed to, I'd rather assume the good intent and be wrong than assume the wrong intent and be right. Right. So, because that puts me in a different spot too. That's a really great perspective. It was just ironic that that's what we talked about. That was so funny.
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, of course, Frank. Go ahead.
I learned this, the word assume, as a 8th grade basketball player at halftime from the coach that ended up, I had as a teacher. He ended up being a principal. I hired my wife. My wife worked in his building, ended up being a superintendent of a building my students' district went to. But we learned assume, and with the chalkboard and the spit flying and the circle of the first 3 letters and another big circle of this, and because someone else thought someone was going to guard somebody, and he said, "Well, I assumed so and so was going to do this." And I learned that lesson in 8th grade, what that word meant to competitive people.
Yeah, right. I agree.
That's right. With an emphasis on the first 3 letters, and what happens to us.
I broke the chalk, and chalk was flying.
That's right.
Chalk.
Hey, Joe, I'm glad that my parents are not here, because they probably would have shared with you, and Frank, not the API or the AHI, but they would have talked about the AWI, that they assumed a whiny intent on my part when I was a kid, because I was always crying about something. So here's the thing, though. It's funny you talk about that, because the whole idea of assumptions, right? And I do think, though, that, we talked about this, Joe, that I think we can all fall to that place, because I think those assumptions are based on our history with people.
Yes.
And over time, because we have history, we do make assumptions about people. And that's where I think we have to be really intentional, right? Not to do that, because it's easy to fall in that trap, because I think that's where the labels come from, right? The labels come from our experiences with people, right? And then therefore we begin to assume that, right? And it's just, we just fall back to that. It's kind of, just something that happens sometimes, I believe.
And the other thing, go ahead. I'm sorry, go. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say this. And the second point I was going to think, as I was reflecting what you were saying, Frank, is you said something that made me think, maybe I even posed the wrong question, because maybe these are 2 different things we're talking about. On one regard, we're talking about the personalities of people, the charismatic personalities. But sometimes we are talking about skill sets, and they aren't personalities, they're skills. And so maybe there's a difference, right, in terms of the leadership. As you look at a leader, is it a skill issue or is it a personality thing? And I do think sometimes our personalities can hurt us as leaders. If you come across a little rigid, right, that's a personality trait, but you're going to need a skill set to address the rigidity of yourself, in other words, to change that. And so I was just thinking about that as you were talking about that, because I feel like I'm combining them too, right? And they're 2 different things. So anyway, that's just what I was thinking about.
But they play off of each other so well.
Yes.
If you were to take it's like taking a piece of paper and drawing a line down the middle and writing down all your personality traits, where you believe that your personality traits are. You are outgoing? Are you charismatic? Are you introverted or whatever? You put those on one side. On the other side, you put down a skill set, things that you're really, really good at, things that you want to get better at. What you're going to find is you're going to find some correlation in terms of obviously things that, if you're outgoing, you might be your skill set, maybe being in front of people, having a good conversation and not feeling nervous about that. If you're introverted, you may have the opposite piece of it. That doesn't mean that because you're introverted, you can't get up in front of people. That's something that you're going to have to do. It doesn't mean that if you're outgoing that you can't sit down in a room and have a conversation at a very low level just to make sure that people feel valued in that moment, as opposed to being you rah-rah guy. So it's just knowing where you are. You develop the skill set along the way. And the only thing I was going to say, in addition to what you said, Jimmy, with the assumptions, and we fall into that trap of, our history dictates how we view people in that particular moment. The other thing that we have to consider is let's make sure that it's just our opinion in that moment too, because if I assume something about you because I've had history with you and something happens in that moment, that can't be or shouldn't be somebody else's a perspective of you. So if I share my perspective of you in that moment because of the history that I have to this person over here, and then that becomes their perspective of you because that's what I shared with them, and I'm not giving you a chance to be in a different situation with them because of the history that I've had with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of where that gossip comes from. It's where labeling comes from. Gossip, absolutely. And then that label becomes, but that's not my experience. But you're telling me your experiences, which the intent behind that is to share it. Is it to protect me? Is it to influence me? What is the purpose of the gossip? Right. And so that's why culture is so complex, because there are so many personalities in our school buildings, and not just of the adults, but the kids as well. And so that's what we're always trying to navigate. And so why are we sharing this information? It's because it's based on our experiences. And sometimes people don't necessarily do that with bad intent. Sometimes they're trying to protect us, trying to forewarn us a little bit. But sometimes, how some people say, hey, I don't want to know anything about my kids. I want to experience that on my own. I don't need to hear your, I want to have my own experiences, or vice versa. You share it, but that's not been my experience with the individual. And we see this all the time when people are negative about somebody else and say, well, I'm sorry you've had that experience. I see it. That's just not been my experience. And so I do think sometimes people are trying to influence us in that way, and not for a bad reason. So
that goes back to what Frank was saying, just about, the relationships determine results. Your results are going to come out based on the relationship that you have with that person, even if somebody else had a negative interaction with them. I mean, Frank said it better than I would. You know what I mean? Anything else to add on that, Frank, just in terms of relationship building and the importance of it in your space?
Well, I think going back to just being present and being that listener, because I agree what Jimmy was saying. If you just take another person's thoughts or ideas or beliefs of someone else, and that has not been your experience, and you allow that to infiltrate how you may work with that person, how you may spend time with that person, how you may look at that person, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Right.
And I went to a basketball game of two of our partner schools last night, and I was talking to a person. I go up and sit down and say, how in the world do you even talk to them? Well, my relationship with that person is completely different than the relationship you had with that person. They did. I'm looking at it a completely different aspect than what you are. If someone's trying to get something out of somebody, it's going to be a different look. But that was perfectly said, Jimmy. That did make a lot of sense.
Yeah, someone once said to me that listening is listening is how do you say that? Well, listening is learning. Yeah, I don't even remember. It was so impactful that I can't remember. It was listening is learning, talking is teaching, and you have to know when to do both.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got there, Joe. It just took me a while.
Yeah.
It just took me a while to get there.
Yeah, I don't know about that. It took you a long while to get there, man. That was funny. Yeah, and there was if the more that we can put ourselves in a situation where we learn more about the people that we serve, then we're in a much better situation when you do have these interactions where somebody says to you, well, that person's super negative. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. If you don't have any other interactions with that person, you're going to assume that that's the way that the person is. But the more interactions that you've had with that person, the person that's being talked about negatively, when somebody else says something about them, now you've now you have something to say. Now you can say what you just said, Jimmy. Well, that has not been my experience with that person.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If we don't have those interactions, then we lay victim to somebody else's narrative about who they are. The same thing with schools in general, right? If people don't know what you do, they make up what you do. And that's what, I mean, I talk about that every time I get in front of a group of people. It's no different here when we're talking about the, interactions with our colleagues, with the people that we lead. Is if we don't have any information to talk about the positive stuff, then we're going to lay victim to somebody else's narrative about who they are.
I just wish this, Joe, that when you look across our profession, and there's always this divisiveness between students and teachers, teachers and principals in central office, there's always this undercurrent of people pointing the finger somewhere or at someone. And I just wish people would understand that every one of us, regardless of our role in education, we're all vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, when someone comes to us to talk about someone else, if we could just remember that there are probably others talking about us in the same way.
Yeah.
None of us are immune from that. Every one of us, if you just look at the parallels, we're all really kind of the same. So I don't know why we spend so much time creating so many issues in our culture about this us versus them, because we're all in that situation. Teachers are vulnerable to the kids and the parents they serve. There are students and parents in the community, sometimes talking positively about teachers, sometimes talking negatively about teachers. There are teachers in every building talking positively about administration and negative. And there are principals in every building talking positive and negative about central office. We are all vulnerable to that. So why can't we just create a culture permission where everybody gives everybody else permission to help us be a better version of ourselves? Because that's what we're all trying to do. And so it comes in positive intent, right, Frank? API, baby. That's
I love it. Great job, Frank.
API.
Joe, if you notice that as soon as we have Frank on the show, it's probably the best show of the year. So Frank,
probably without hesitation. Without hesitation. Great job, Frank. I appreciate it. We appreciate you being here, Frank. That was fantastic.
Guys,
Frank, do me a favor, Frank. Reach out to me. Drop me your address. I'd love to send you a couple books. Recalibrate the Culture, Crafting the Culture, for just jumping in here and being vulnerable, and like to send you a couple books if you don't mind. So drop us any other book. You're going
to use this as a marketing tool. Are you out of your mind? You're going to use this as a marketing. You bring Frank in here and then you push your books. Are you kidding me right now?
Frank, don't listen to Joe right now, because first of all, listen.
Any book. Pick
he
any
did not
book from the
learn
Connect
one
Ed series.
thing, did he, Frank? He did not learn one thing. There is no API being modeled here, is there? Is there, Frank? No API.
Pick a book.
Hey, I'm going to go AHI. I'm going to assume honest intent then.
No, not me, man. My history leads me to a different place, Frank, with this right now. Yeah. Well, pick a Connect Ed.
There's my history. There it is again, Frank. Joe, you're exactly the reason why we do this show and why people come on here is because Joe, watch.
I'm done.
Joe, watch.
Don't take it off.
You're out of there. You are out of there. We're done with you. We're done with it.
It's a very average hat. That's a very average hat. You've now lost. If you're going to gamble today, you've now lost. You are going to lose. You won't have books to give to Frank. You won't have anything left. If you would have kept the Fall Creek hat on, you'd be okay.
Frank, it's December 10th, and Joe has one sale this month, so we're going to try to double his sales. That's why we're giving it to you, buddy. That's the
go
truth.
away. I'm done. I'm done with you. You guys are fantastic. Have a great week, everybody.
Take care. Thanks, Frank. Take care, everybody. God bless, and have a great week. Love you guys.
Well.
Take care, man.